Never be afraid. No matter what, never have any fear. For when you do the work of God, sometimes the very ones that fight against you are from within your own ranks. But God will be with you to the end. It's wonderful to see you again. I'm so glad Anna and I are back from Paris, France. But it is now time for the call to prayer. Yes, my brothers and sisters, it's wonderful to have you here, my friends. I am so glad to be back. Anna and I came back safely. We had last Sabbath the sermon. It was wonderful. I mean, the time with you was wonderful. But now we've got the call to prayer. But I want to let you know. And by the way, just as a house cleaning, I'm Pastor John from Livingstone's and Sunland Seventh-day Adventist Churches. And we need to continue on. We missed 1 week, and I missed you very much. And you may not have missed me, but I missed you. But here we are, Acts chapter 18. If you'll remember, 2 weeks ago, we left off where Paul had a dream in the middle of the night, where God said, "Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Be not silent, for I am with you, and no one is going to attack nor harm you, because I have many people in this city." I mentioned that this city was much like Los Angeles, Corinth. The place of Corinth was a place of cosmopolitan. It was a place of art and interconnection, but most of all, commerce and drama. And so many things are moving through that city. And in that city, there were little galvanized groups. And one of those groups was the Jewish people, because Rome had forced many of the Jews out of Rome, out of the province of Rome. And so they had to settle in places they were allowed to be, for Claudius had forced them out. The Jewish people had gotten into their little community, and oftentimes they're called ghettos, the Adventist ghetto, there's the Jewish ghetto, these different places where we kind of clump together as a group. You'll have in LA, you'll have Filipino town. I mean, it's not so much Filipino anymore, but I mean, you'll have Chinatown, you'll have Little Japan, Koreatown, and you have these places. In New York, it was Little Italy, and it was the Feast of San Gennaro, in Little Italy, we'd have Chinatown there. These little hubs and communities where they actually can even speak their own languages. And it was no different in Corinth than anywhere else. The Jewish community was there, and they were strong, and they were well-to-do. And knowledge was all about Greek culture. And without realizing, many of the Jewish people and many of the rabbis had become very, very, very Greek in their thinking. Even though they said they were Hebrew, even though they said they had letters of commendation, as you see in the book of Corinth, where Paul referred to later, that there were letters from the temple saying that these people are good people, and they should be the leaders of the synagogue, right? And but they weren't living like leaders should. And so Paul was dealing with this, and this happened. Paul got in trouble with the Jewish community, because that community, number one, he started preaching about Jesus, and they didn't mind that. They didn't like that Jesus was central to the religion anymore, but or that he was central to this new teaching. But what really offended them is that outsiders started coming in. People that weren't a part started to become a part. And we didn't want to do it the way that they do it. We want to do it, we do it. Right? And when outsiders come in, especially in the Christian community, when you have people of different cultures coming into a church or a community, what happens is oftentimes, as the new people come in, the people that are power brokers in that community, the original community, start to become upset because no one knows them as a leader. They only know Paul as a leader and Silas as leaders. They don't know the leaders of the synagogue that was formerly. And so many of those leaders start to fight against Paul. Isn't it interesting that the true war with Paul had nothing to do with outsiders and pagans not wanting to hear about Jesus? It had to do with people who were on the side of God, the Jewish people who were fighting against Paul, just like when Jesus was here on earth. I've always said it. It was good Seventh-day Adventists that had Jesus crucified. We have to watch ourselves always. We judge ourselves. It was good Christians that crucified Jesus. I mean, I know that's not specifically true. It was Jewish people, I understand, and Romans, but yet at the same time, if we don't have introspection to understand ourselves, then we lose who we are as a people. So, in chapter 18 of Acts, they drag Paul to Gallo, the proconsul of Achaia, meaning Achaia is the Greek area. This larger area, Achaean islands, the Achaean islands, or the Greek Hellenes, the ancient Hellenes, which is where we get the name Greek from. And Gallo was a proconsul. He was in there, and the Jews in Corinth made a united attack on Paul and brought him to the place of judgment. Verse 13. And this man, they charged, is persuading people to worship God in ways that are contrary to the law. Wow. Jesus is the embodiment of the law. Isn't it interesting how the very law written by the finger of God is that law that human beings use against God? Isn't it very interesting? We even have that sometimes in our own churches, don't we? It's why we have to have self-retrospective thought. We need to think about ourselves. The one thing that sets us apart from the animals is that we are self-aware. We must be self-aware. Verse 14. Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallo said to them, wait a minute. If you Jews are making complaints about some misdemeanor or serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names in your own law, settle that matter among yourselves. This is why in the book of Corinthians, Paul talks about lawsuits. Don't go to the magistrates out there about your own stuff. Stop suing each other. Don't go to the law and try to have them do the work, your dirty work for you. If you don't like somebody, tell them you don't like them. Don't sue them in public square and make them look bad in the world. Instead, deal with it directly. This is the problem that we oftentimes have even today. We Christians, sometimes, we Seventh-day Adventists, sometimes can't just settle matters amongst ourselves. You know, in Matthew chapter 18, Jesus gave us a beautiful piece of advice. And it wasn't just advice, it was strong teaching. If you have a problem with someone in the congregation, first you go and speak to that person directly. Matthew chapter 18. I don't have it right here. It's later on in the chapter. You can look it up. Matthew chapter 18. If you have a problem, first you speak to that person individually. If that person does not take that as true, then what you do is then you bring another person with you and you speak to them. If that still does not do it, then you bring it to the community. You don't bring it to the community first. You don't just go to a board meeting and just spill out everything. You want to deal with it like Jesus did. Instead, you don't go just straight up to the whole congregation and just start spilling out all the problems. Speak directly to the individual. That eliminates politics. It eliminates dissension. It eliminates destructive things. But unfortunately, when we don't follow Jesus' way, we get exactly what you have here in Acts, where people want to drag everyone. Oh, they're nice to Paul's face. I mean, they disagree, but they disagree among themselves, and they all whisper in the back rooms, and then they create a big riot against Paul. But if anyone has any problems, they can step back and say, it wasn't me, it was them. And everyone points at each other. See how that works? So then they go to the law, the proconsul, and this guy says, wait a minute. Why am I judging something about your laws? Go figure it out yourselves. This is why God gave the dream to Paul, saying, don't be afraid. It's so hard to deal with people who have no rules. And after all, we know they didn't have any rules. We find it in the book of 1 Corinthians. Right here, chapter 3. There's this battle between people. There's these hupo-apostolon, or super apostles. These people who say they're so much better than Paul because they financially and with street cred are able to try to beat Paul politically. I'm in charge of the synagogue. I can sleep with I'm not talking about myself, but one of these guys wasn't named here, but he's in charge of the synagogue, and he can sleep with his own father's wife. I don't know how that works, guys. I guess it wasn't his mom. I guess his father had had a divorce or something had happened, and yet they think they can be in charge of the church. You guys aren't even moral, and yet you want to be in charge of the church? You want to be called a super apostle? Paul says, how about this? Follow Jesus, carry his cross. They said, well, what papers are from the temple saying, Paul, you're so great? And Paul says, you know what my papers are? I was whipped twice. I was beaten with rods. I was stoned. I had shipwrecks. Those are my letters of accommodation from God. Paul says, I deserve to speak because God gave me a message. And the truth that that's a true message is that God walked with me, and I was willing to give my body to be hurt for him. Sometimes we like to use our words as the way in. That's how it was in Corinth. That's how the whole place survived. It's how Los Angeles survives. Politics. And we must rise above it. But yet, when we rise above it, we must always have love for those who we can reach. Interestingly enough, right after this happened, all of the crowd, instead of attacking Paul, then attacked the synagogue chief, the synagogue captain, so to say, and they beat him up right in front of Gatto, and he didn't even do anything. Evil always hurts itself. Paul steps back. The message moves forward, and I'll see you next week. Now remember, in the next few moments, we will be having intercession. And so I look forward to seeing you. We'll go through all the prayer list. I haven't been getting as many prayer requests. I understand no one wanted to bother me in France. I totally get that. But now we can start continuing on. And don't forget, on Sabbath morning, between Sabbath school and church, we have a good 20 minutes for you to have prayer time here in the youth room as well. So I'll see you in intercession next few moments. God bless.